Hi, I'm Heather Naventi, and this is Ruby, who is an 8-year-old miniature horse. Very similar in stature to a pony, but actually a whole different thing. Miniature horses were bred down kind of like toy dogs from full-size horse stock, selectively bred to reduce their proportions and have them look under ideal circumstances like the perfect proportions of a large-sized horse in a small package. And they're useful for being pets and also for driving, which means they pull a carriage that you can sit in. And they also use them as therapy animals, and now in the past 10 or 15 years they've been training miniature horses to be guide dog horses. A miniature horse lifespan is 40 to 50 years, so they outlive and have more longevity to their usefulness than the average guide dog. And they're incredibly trainable and intelligent, so they can be taught all of the commands that a guide dog would have. A little bit beefier, a little bit stronger. Yes, you agree? They require pretty much the same care as a full-sized horse, but are a little more manageable, tractable. I've had her since she was 4 months old. She was about the size of Blade, and hopefully I will have her until she's 45 or 50, so it's quite a long-term commitment. I use her for a lot of public presentations like this because she fits in areas, and she's quite friendly, and if you would like to pet her or ask any questions about care or feeding or any of that kind of thing, she'd be happy to answer.
Are you saying that she could round up geese also?
Sure.
Wow.
If I was able to figure out what Eric does, you could teach her to do that as well. Sure. They do agility with miniature horses and horses, which is a very similar thing to dog agility rather, where they go over tarps and bridges and through poles and over jumps without being on a lead. I don't do that kind of thing. My horse involvement is riding and driving, but they're incredibly intelligent.
Is there such a thing as a guard horse?
There are guard donkeys.
Oh, right.
Horses are a prey animal, and they are highly reactive in what's called flight or flight response. Their first mode of defense is to get away. They use donkeys to guard alpacas and sheep, and they are extremely dog aggressive, so they will go after a coyote or wolf that would be a threat to the sheep quite nicely. Restrictions on them are that they are a single-hooved animal, unlike a cow, so they've got one solid hoof. So you have to be a little bit more cautious with a horse on a slippery surface. So for going into buildings, they will fit them with little rubber shoes. They have a little more grip. They get desensitized and trained to be unfazed by all the noises that they might see. A neat advantage of a horse over a guide dog is that horses will look up as they're going, and they'll watch for overhead dangers to their handler. So they've found with guide ponies that they're a little bit more adaptable to overhanging dangers. Pretty neat. And like I said, their lifespan being so long, especially with the amount of time that you spend with an animal that is a therapy animal or a guide animal, it's not as if you're going out and interacting with them an hour a day. The people that are engaged with them or working with them, 16, 18 hours a day, they really figure out routines very quickly. If I wanted to, she could fit into Eric's element. She'd jump right in the back there and go anywhere you want to take. I didn't bring it with me today, but she would wear a harness, like an old days workhorse, and you would sit behind them in the carriage and drive. And once conditioned, a pony like her could take me 20 or 30 miles. The big issue you have to be careful of with a miniature horse is that going down a hill, they don't have the mass to hold a person and a cart back. So you either have to have brakes to help them so you don't push them over, or plan your route so that you don't have a lot of steep downhills, or get out. But their pulling power on the flat, she is about 250 pounds. She can pull 2 or 3 times her own weight with ease. A full-sized horse, depending on the terrain that they're on, is usually once or twice their weight. So proportionally, a miniature horse or even a pony actually can pull substantially more.
How old is she again?
She is 8. Yep. Just turned 8.
One half horsepower.
Right. And she's 34 inches tall at her withers. The withers are the point of their shoulder of their back here, and that's where you measure horses too for their height. People think you would measure to their head, but they can put their head up and down, so that would be inaccurate. So when we talk about horse height, we're measuring to the withers, which is also the point where your saddle sits behind, and they're measured in hands. Hand is the average width of a man's hand sideways is 4 inches. So you would start at the ground and go up. They make a measuring stick for it. So she is 8 hands, 2 inches. An average horse is 14 2 hands, and they go upward from there.
And in addition to driving, they can little children.
Yeah, she is trained to be ridden, but they don't really make a saddle that is proportional for a pony as small as she is, so it would just be bareback, sitting right on her back. And she could carry someone, up to, say, 100 pounds with reasonable comfort. Small children are just fine to ride them. Just because they're little doesn't mean that they aren't, horse-like, which means that they are instinctually reactive. So they have to be desensitized and trained so that they aren't startled and frightened by things, because she could go from here to there in half a second. And if your child was on and she hadn't been trained to be ridden, she could cause just as much injury and harm as a full-sized horse. But once they're acclimated to things and conditioned to respond appropriately, you can take them and do just about anything. And my other horses, I have 3 others, are 8, 17, and 30. So, yeah.
Is the gestation period the same for normal sized horses?
Yes. Yep. The issue with miniature horses, much like toy breeds of dogs, is because they've been bred down structurally, they can have problems foaling sometimes, because the foals, it is proportionally smaller, but they're still big, and so they can have a problem with passing them through the opening in their pelvis. Sometimes they have to have cesareans. But other than that, they're identical. Their metabolism is different. A full-sized horse has usually a little higher metabolism. A miniature horse like her, even though proportionally she's supposed to look like a horse, digestively she could exist pretty much on dirt and sticks. She's an easy keeper, they call it. So while she would love to eat this field of grass, it would be like us eating cotton candy for 4 days, and it would make her really sick.
What does she eat?
She eats hay, a little more than she should. She's a little bit round, and she gets a very, very small amount of grain, and that's primarily for vitamins and minerals. She can have treats like apples and carrots occasionally, but it's kind of a restrictive diet. And actually that would be a very dangerous thing. If you crossed a miniature horse with a full-sized horse, the foal would potentially kill her.
Yeah.
The mare, which is the girl horse, does determine the size of the foal because it's constricted, but the genes will also produce, a bigger foal. So,
But it's, it's a line that's bred, so it will always keep a small.
yes, I guess it's possible that you could have a throwback crossing 2 miniature horses and have one that would be bigger, but bigger would be this much bigger, not full-size bigger. In, say, 30 or 40 years, if I crossed her with a little bigger pony and then that with a little bigger pony, then I could, reproduce a bigger horse. No, I don't think so. There are a tremendous number of horses in the world. I've been involved with horses since my youth, and all of the animals that I've ever gotten have been someone else's cast-offs. She was I have a pony tied to a tree, you can come get it or I'll shoot it. So we got a pony, which isn't a pony, it's a miniature horse. And she's lovely. But to breed more of them, she is not registered, she's not extraordinary, although she is. There's nothing about her that makes it, I must produce another one of these. So although it would be cute to have a baby, not really a responsible choice. Plus the fact that I'm over 40. She's going to live another 40 years. That's probably going to do it for me. The second half of their life, say 25 on, they're going to be more of a middle to late aged human being. So their usefulness is there, but it's not the same as their prime years, which would be probably 3 to 25 or so. If they have great conformation, which is the way they're put together, they're used and trained carefully, they're kept fit, There have been racehorses that race to 10, 12 years old very successfully, and they have a whole different type of racing for mature horses. The really popular races are all for under 4 years old.
Right.
That's where the big money is, per se. But
So Kelso raced
Mhm.
at least 10 years, and,
Yep.
but he was a gelding.
right, John Henry was another who was really famous and long-lasting. Geldings are male horses that have been neutered or castrated, and they are less hormonal, less reactive to outside influences, and a little more tractable. So geldings in all forms tend to be a little bit easier to work with. And the other thing with a racehorse, as a gelding, his only income is going to be from racing. As a stallion, he can be retired and probably bred to raise money. But for a gelding, it's either race or
The field.
the field would be ideal. Usually it's a trip to Japan on a boat. Anyway, whole different thing.
Does she
So-
need to be, like dogs and cats, spayed or neutered or anything like that? If she's
They
around
don't
other
very
horses?
frequently spay female horses, although it can be done. They usually geld males, and that takes care of
You
the.
don't have to worry about it being around other.
Nope, they don't. They do go into heat, a heat cycle, once a month from spring until fall, but they don't generally act adversely. It's not really a terrible thing to manage.
And since she's not around stallions much,
Correct.
that's not an issue.
Yep. So she gets her feet, her hooves trimmed every 6 to 8 weeks to keep them from overgrowing and getting twisted and unbalanced.
You need horseshoes?
She doesn't wear any horseshoes. Miniature horses have really heavy, dense feet. If you were to drive her up and down a road a lot, it could wear her feet off quicker than she could grow them, and she could need to have shoes. But generally, something her size, they're not really heavy, so they're not wearing on their feet as much, and they usually have a really dense, hard hoof.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
Wonderful.